On this week's podcast, I am speaking with Reverend Rivka Gevurtz. Reverend Gevurtz is an interfaith minister. She is core faculty with the Chaplaincy Institute. And we're going to be talking with Reverend Rivka about independent spiritual paths. We've been talking about several of the religions in the world peace Reiki grids, and Reverend Rivka is gracious enough to offer to talk with us, or to agree to talk with us about independent spiritual paths today. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go too far, I just want to let you know that for those of you who are able to attend or who would like to attend the International Center for Reiki Training Reiki Retreat, the International Reiki Retreat, the in-person spaces in Sedona, Arizona have been filled, but they are still selling the online versions. And so any of you who are interested in attending that, I'll be presenting with Colleen Benelli about Animal Reiki, our wonderful Animal Reiki course. I also have a little presentation in there that participants will receive, just helping people find their path, their own path with Reiki. So I encourage you, I'll put a link to that in the podcast notes, and I'll encourage you to check that out if you're interested. I also wanted to let you know that I will also put a link to the Reiki Business book. I know some of you have mentioned that you still want to pick it up, so I'll just continue putting a link to that in the podcast if any of you wish to pick that up. And that's about bringing Reiki into whatever business you do, whether you are a spiritual advisor or a minister or a nurse or a doctor. And so even if you're not thinking of creating an independent business with Reiki, if you just want to look at how Reiki can move through you a little bit more, whether you're a hairdresser or no matter what you do, the book is designed for that, and it's designed to help you find your own individual and unique path with Reiki in your work. So go ahead and check that out if that speaks to you. And then finally, some of you have wanted to visit us here at the farm, and I wanted to let you know that in October I have a 5-day Reiki level 1 and 2 and master class. Those are licensed classes because they are being taught by me as a licensed teacher with the ICRT, and those will be both online and in person. So I would encourage you to go ahead and register for that. That class is getting a little bit busy and starting to fill. So go ahead and register for those if you would like to attend, and even if you want to review a class with a licensed teacher. And also, just a little bit after that, the week after, also in October, I have the 5 days Animal Reiki level 1 and 2 and master. And you can take just the level 1 and 2, just the master, or both. It's your preference. There are some prerequisites for Animal Reiki. You do have to have level 1 and 2 Reiki from any lineage before you study level 1 and 2 Animal Reiki. And you have to have level 1 and 2 Animal Reiki plus a master's level from any lineage before studying at the Animal Reiki master level. But I'd love to have you join us if that speaks to you. And for those of you who are ready to let Reiki take you further by checking into Karuna Reiki, is an advanced Reiki master class, and it really takes things further. I remember thinking before studying Karuna Reiki that becoming a Reiki master had made my life so beautifully balanced and just so exceptional that I remember having the specific thought, life doesn't get any better than this. And then I studied Karuna Reiki, and of course it did get better. And so if you've ever had that in the back of your mind, or you are thinking you might be ready to take things a little further, that class is at the very end of October and beginning of November. And all of those classes are both in person here at the farm for people who want to travel here and be here, And they're online for anybody who prefers to study at home. So I'd love to have you join us if that speaks to you. Reverend Rivka, I think you've got some pretty interesting things on your schedule as well. I wonder if you'd share it with our listeners.
Be happy to. Listeners can definitely go to my website, to my upcoming events page, where they'll find things like I do a monthly interspiritual Sunday school for grown-ups, as well as a monthly new moon celebration. And I speak at congregations and other organizations on matters of spirit and the intersection between spirit and social justice. So you can find any of those upcoming events there. My next event is going to be the new moon celebration coming up later this month.
Oh, that sounds lovely. I think I might check that out myself. I love new moon celebrations. So thank you. Before we go too far into our conversation today, I just wonder if the listeners would join us in a brief invocation. So I'm going to just invite everybody to bring your hands together in Gasho with your thumbs at your heart. And just activate your Reiki energy, and just invite your Reiki symbols to be with you here today, and just help you pick up the parts of this podcast and of what we're speaking about that are relevant to you. One of the things that Reverend Rivka and I were talking about was acceptance prior to beginning the recording, and just how important it is for us to learn about these different perspectives. And Reiki can support us in this, to learn the different perspectives of people who are on different spiritual paths than we are, or even that are on the same one but that are approaching it differently. And just that love and acceptance and understanding. And so we invite the energies of love and acceptance and understanding and even appreciation to flow through us now, just appreciating that all roads lead home, regardless of the path that we choose to make our way to Source or Spirit or God or whatever name you choose to call the Creator. Regardless of the path we choose, we are all moving in the same direction, and we are all love at the core of our beings. And I just invite you to allow your heart to expand now to include every living being on the planet. Every person, every earthworm, every bird, every mammal, every reptile, every water dweller. And just in appreciation for the different ways that we express ourselves and the fact that we are all still connected. Life force energy that flows through us all. And we send Reiki to the division that sometimes exists within religions, within spiritual paths, within the ways that people choose to express themselves. And just inviting that division, that duality, to find its way back to Source, so that we can all begin to appreciate and revel in our oneness, in our similarities, in the fact that Every being at their core is love. Reverend Rivka, would you like to add anything today?
Source of light and love, who is known by many names and no name at all. We thank you for holding this space with us, for reminding us that we, like you, are beings of light and beings of hope and love, and that together we can work miracles. May it be so.
Namaste. Thank you. Rivka, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what you do and the spiritual path that you often find yourself supporting people on these days.
Be happy to. My particular ministry, I have a few, one of them being teaching seminary students, but my primary private practice is a combination of Reiki and spiritual direction. When someone enters spiritual direction, it looks a little bit like therapy, but it, as one of my professors put it, it's like couples therapy, but the couple is you and your understanding of the divine.
Wow.
And so it's about meaning making and finding what's true for each individual based on their own spiritual path. Most spiritual directors across the board, whether they're members of Spiritual Directors International or not, understands that we're there to companion and witness for an individual. The director piece is a misnomer. It comes from an old model, but it's about being witness and companion as each person connects with the ineffable that is true to them and makes meaning through that of the liminal spaces in their lives.
Wow. That's absolutely beautiful. And we were talking earlier, actually just yesterday, when we were trying to figure out where what you do fits in with the world peace grids and with the different religions, and we realized this was independent spiritual paths. And that's something I remember saying to Colleen Benelli, that I wasn't sure where I fit anymore, because I felt that I'd outgrown the Christian background that I had been raised in. Not that I have anything against it, it's just it almost felt like I'd gone beyond it or something. And as a scientist, and Reiki helped me reconcile a lot of that. I remember when I first studied science, in classes, people would say, okay, throw out all that Bible stuff. You're scientists now, and forget about 7 days and creation and all of the things you learned. And that was really difficult for me, because I had been a Sunday school teacher. I had been very involved in my church. My mom and dad were very involved in my church. And Reiki really helped me bring that together and make peace with that. And I remember Colleen just looking at me and saying, you're a scientist. That's independent spiritual paths. And I thought, oh, I had no idea that being a scientist would be independent spiritual paths. And yet, in the course of my work, I actually was very fortunate to have worked with some people that were involved in very high level physics. You know, we built vacuum chambers, and we were building a vacuum chamber for the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory in the US. And one of the top engineers was just this wonderful fellow that I really enjoyed working with. And we went to lunch one day, and he was explaining to me about that although he had a background in Judaism, his son was actually a Hasidic Jew, and just thought his father was terrible because he talked to angels, and he was explaining that he was very in touch with his abilities. And this was before I was enlightened, Rivka. It was before I knew any of this existed. I was still in my very rigid science mindset. And I just looked at him in shocked, and I said, Mike, how do you reconcile that you're one of the top engineers and scientists in the world, and you're talking to me about angels and God and religion? How do you reconcile that? I was trying to reconcile that within myself, and I was struggling with it. And I'll never forget, Rivka, he looked at me and said, Pam, science is just trying to figure out what God already knows.
Exactly. Yes.
And I thought, that's brilliant. And
Yes.
it is. And you mentioned that although you work interfaith, and so you understand and have studied and have worked with many faiths, that you're finding more and more people that are working with you are identify as spiritual but not religious. Can you tell us a
Right.
little bit about that?
Certainly. So the things that you've just said are all part of that same search. We're all in the process of meaning making. And it's interesting. There are wise folks who have said in recent years, and I've heard it from multiple brilliant speakers, that the mystics of all of the traditions, and I would say the mystics of science, who I would call the quantum physicists,
Good
have
point.
far more in common with each other than they do with the elementary fundamental levels of any one tradition, because of the recognition that we each have a fractal of truth. We each have a fractal of the divine's eye that we see through. And when somebody has become spiritual but not religious, often they have, as you have, evolved beyond the dogmas and strictures of one tradition to
Yes.
recognize that the beauty of the spiritual element goes beyond those constructs. All of the religions have had and do serve a purpose for some people. They are part of meaning making. And that's what all of this is about. It's about meaning making for what is true for me. How do I move forward in my life? And the language gets calcified in a lot of traditions because that's the difference between love and fear. Love is that energetic, it's just as Reiki, and Reiki is a part of it, it's the energetic of movement and hope and divine creation. Whereas fear, which many religions, because they're made up of people, we get scared that we're doing it right. And so more and more boxes get put around things. Somebody who's spiritual but not religious is saying, I know there's an ineffable energy or source or being that I still feel connected to, but I don't need the baggage that has come with my tradition of origin. Some people have gone through spiritual wounding and reject religion for that reason. And for others, it's simply an evolution in this time of, as many of our wise sages are saying, this time of paradigm shift. We are moving out beyond the strictures of what we have known. And so many of the people who are spiritual but not religious are stepping into that unknown and saying, what is it we have forgotten? What is it we don't know yet? How do I want to live my life in a way that is connected to spirit, but not locked into otherizing all of the divine's other creatures and all of the other manifestations of humanity?
As you say that, I just get such a feeling of gratitude that we live in an era where this is possible, where it is possible for us to step out of that external authority and into our inner authority,
Mhm.
and make our own decisions. It's
Mhm.
this age of spiritual and religious freedoms. And I know that, yes, there are always going to be groups that would like to put controls on things and that, but think back, and the Religious Freedoms Act really only came through in the US. It was the 1970s, I believe. And
Mhm.
when I think that's really important. I think that has given us the ability that if we want to explore Buddhism, if we want to explore just any other spiritual path, my son was making fun of us in a way, although he's the same way. We take spiders out of our house, and we don't like to kill anything. And he said, I think you guys are becoming Buddhists. There's a lot to be said for that. It's a wonderful spiritual tradition. And you talked about the fractal that each of us see. And I tend to get, when I work with the divine, when I speak with the divine, I tend to get pictures to help me understand things. I need simple explanations. And I can remember one day when I was just asking, like, why can't we all get along? Aren't we all doing the same thing, just in a slightly different way? And this was around the time when I was shown that I should probably write a book about this. Now, I say about the book called All Roads Lead Home, just comparing the different religions and so on. I've never had time to get that book going, unfortunately. And so these podcasts are a way that I can do it a little bit more simply, and just ask people to think about this, the fact that we're all looking for the same thing, like what you said, Rivka. And I saw this enormous image of this light that was just so bright you could hardly look at it. And to me, that is the image when I'm speaking with or communicating with, I shouldn't, yeah, communicating with God. I get this image of this beautiful ball of light, but what I saw was that there are 7 billion people on the planet today, and all of us are around that light looking at it. But if you're looking from down here versus up here or over there, you've got a slightly different perspective.
Exactly. What you're speaking to reminds me of a book that I read many years ago, maybe 50 years ago, that was called Mr. God, This is Anna. And
Oh, I read that.
yes. So you'll recall Anna is this 5-year-old child, and there's this one statement where she says, because she was looking through a prism, and she says to Flynn, her um, got no point of view. God's got viewing point. How does he? All of a sudden, I had it in my mind, and now it went out. God's got a point of view. God's got a million viewing points. So the idea that we try to stuff spirit into this finite little box, and the Jewish sages for a couple thousand years have been saying that anything you say about God is immediately wrong because it can't contain it all.
Right.
Because there's so much to the divine that we're not even aware of, that our limited human understanding, and that's why we end up with limited religious experiences as opposed to the Einstein, as Jewish tradition puts it, the no thingness of the divine. And in the same ways that Eastern traditions have the idea of the difference between Atman and Brahman. Brahman being part of God we can understand with that which is beyond understanding. All of the world traditions have some variation of understanding that, yeah, the stuff we're talking about is so limited, and there is something beyond that we can't wrap our human understanding around. And yes, it's that great big ball of light that Rabbi Zalman Schachter Salome had a really wonderful way of putting this. He was the founder of Jewish Renewal. And he used to do panels, interfaith panels. And one of the things that he said that stuck with me over the years, so many traditions are very triumphalist. Oh, their religion isn't as good as ours. We've got all of the answers. And what he says, that instead of a triumphal perspective, we need to cultivate the perspective that each of the different traditions is an organ in the body human, the corporate body of humanity. And in the same way that we wouldn't pluck out our eye or rip out our spleen, we have to find ways of recognizing that there is a truth that each one of those traditions is focused on and is helping for all of our greater good.
Understand.
And then I think there are some of us who are connective tissue, who are able to connect with different traditions, translate between traditions, explore beyond the boundaries of traditions in ways that help all of us grow into the next level of evolution of humanity.
Wow, I love that. And I feel like the inspiration to do these podcasts was the connective tissue. It was, and I feel, I've always felt that the more perspectives we can understand, the greater our knowing of
Absolutely.
God is. And however, the contrary part of me, as you said that everything we say is wrong, I thought, oh, I can think of one thing that's absolutely right about God, and it's I love God.
And that's just it, is that all of these various ways that we speak, yes, we can say it's, the sages may have said everything is wrong, but another way of saying it would be that everything is right, and we haven't discovered the whole of it yet, because we aren't capable yet.
Well, I just, as I was listening to you talk, I always have so much love in my heart for Source and for the planet and actually for every living being that I seem to come across. And I thought, oh, I love the part that I understand, and I love the parts that I don't understand. And I know that there's more that I don't understand than what I do. And I
It's
love
kind of like our Reiki energy. The same way that we can sense that energy, we can visualize it, and yet it's not something we can. As one of my masters used to put it, Sheila King used to say that we're all garden hoses. Those of us who are Reiki practitioners, we're garden hoses to allow spirit and energy to flow through us to where it's needed. So when we're in that place of being that container, it's the divine who is working through us. And it is that same energetic as prayer.
Yes.
Because in both cases, we are beings of light. The quantum physicists have it that we are just energy that appears to be solid. And in reality, we're made up of light and stardust. So if we are indeed light, if we are indeed energy, then of course, the ways we're connecting with each other are energy, our spirit.
I love that. And it is, and it's all energy and it's all love. And yes, fear can come into it, but it doesn't have to, and that can be a conscious choice, and not to allow it. So, how, Reverend Rivka, like, how did you get into doing what you're doing? How were you raised, and what was your religious background, and then how does Reiki weave into that for you?
Certainly. I actually have had a circuitous spiritual journey, as many of us have in our modern era. I was raised Roman Catholic, and my given name was Teresa Ann Marie. You can imagine that my parents wanted to put sister in front of that when I and even as a young child, I knew I wanted to be connected with spirit and the divine, and I also knew that wasn't the right tradition for me. of its patriarchal focus and denigration of women. So even my teen feminist self knew that wasn't the right path for me. And I went from Catholicism to a queer denomination, MCC, Metropolitan Community Churches, and became a deacon there for a while, and then eventually found my spiritual home in Judaism. And so I bring all of that forward with me, and then calling has chased me through all of these various iterations, and eventually determined that the reason I needed to accept call was because I bring all of these backgrounds, all of these journeys, and can be present to those who are struggling with wounding from one particular tradition, yearnings that might be expressed better with spiritual tools from another tradition. Being with somebody, what was a huge factor in my development and in my spirituality was I was a deacon with MCC in New York City at the beginning of the AIDS crisis. And you can't go through that pandemic unchanged. And unchanged, particularly by watching not only the gay guys who got sick, but watching those who were drug affected and homeless. And Reiki played a huge piece of that because we had chaplains on staff, we had nursing staff, and some of the nursing staff were also Reiki practitioners. It eased their symptoms of the just nasty drugs that were being used and experimented with and whatnot. It eased those symptoms, but it did something much more. We talk in Reiki about how there's a difference between healing and cure. Yeah. And that spiritual healing that happened, particularly with folks who, whether it was gay folk, gay men, or a homeless African-American woman who was a drug addict, they were people who society had thrown away, who society rejected, and to watch their spirits heal through their end of life journey was a sacred witnessing. And so spirit and Reiki have been forever linked in my mind and my heart ever since those days back in the 80s.
And you are a Holy Fire, World Peace, I think, Holy Fire Reiki Master now, and Yusui Holy Fire. And how does this come into your practice? Because you use Reiki every day.
I do. So I have some Reiki clients, and I have some spiritual direction clients. And what I do for all of my clients, whether they want Reiki brought into spiritual direction or not, is I always set the container for spiritual direction with Reiki, and making the space in this day of COVID. Many of my clients are still, and most of my clients rather, are still online. They're around the country and whatnot. So utilizing distance Reiki to set that container. And depending on the comfort of the people I participate in, some of them we use Reiki within a spiritual direction session. One instance can be around wanting to heal spiritual religious wounding, using distance Reiki and our mental Reiki tools to go backwards to when the woundings happen and allow for some healing there. I've used it with folks who have ancestral wounding, and used it within my own family with ancestral spiritual wounding and healing that origin point or that individual who has left a legacy that has been passed down through the generations with really some profound effect. And just in terms of the everyday life, I have clients who bring into spirit all aspects of their life. And why isn't this working? whether it's a family issue or a work issue or a finding what their path is. In all cases, Reiki can hold that. And so with those who are open to it, we might do a Reiki guided meditation. We might create a space of energy to allow their spirit guides to be more present to their discernment process. So those are just some of the ways that the two get married in the work that I do.
It sounds loving and full of acceptance. And I love that you say that Reiki can support whatever container. And I've been given some thought about independent spiritual paths. And one of the things, for instance, there is also another symbol on the world peace grids for agnostics and atheists. But really and truly, I feel that those are also independent spiritual paths. And I look at, I've and I've come across some people who identify as atheists, and I've said to them, I said, "Are you really? Because you do seem to believe in something. So are you really atheist?" And they've had to step back and think about that. No, I believe in this. I just don't believe in that way. And I think this is where that category of independent spiritual paths comes in. I've had people tell me I've gone beyond my religion. I feel like, and yet I still feel really connected with it, but I'm aware that my understanding has grown beyond
Right.
what this religion is able to contain. And maybe I'm bringing in understandings from other bits and pieces. I love studying the world's religions because I find pieces of all of them that resonate.
And that's very true. One of the characteristics, as it were, for people who are spiritual but not religious, is they have sojourned in different traditions. They might have been raised Jewish, but they have become Buddhist. They might continue to be a practicing Christian, but they are also exploring the different forms of the divine in Hinduism. For some people, regardless of what tradition they may or may not have grown up in, they find their greatest connection to the ineffable out in nature.
That's what I do, and I think
Right.
that I was actually very drawn to Native American spirituality.
Right.
Was very fortunate that there were Native Americans in my community who were willing to share and open and teach us and allow us to join their sweat lodges and their water ceremonies and just show us that reverence for the earth. And yeah,
It's a huge gift when Indigenous peoples allow us in and invite us in to participate and learn from, because they are holding a truth that we need to reconnect with, and that is our spiritual connection with this planet that we are a part of. We're not separate from her. And I think one of the things that we who are, many of us in the Reiki community are part of the liberal progressive seeker energy. And at the same time, we have an obligation to lift up and appreciate and assimilate traditions. But finding from those traditions, what are the sacred truths that I can make meaning from? And what are the things that I can pull into my own experience that connects me with them and connects me with spirit and honors their tradition as their tradition.
Wow.
But that I'm not appropriating tradition, but I am celebrating and appreciating tradition. I think that's one of the things that becomes a little sticky for folks, because often, particularly folks who've had religious wounding, They do not want to connect with anything that even looks like the tradition they were raised in. And it is not uncommon for people to then go to a sangha or go to a another type of experience that is as far from an ashram or whatever, and just glom onto that. And unfortunately, sometimes that's a way of doing spiritual bypass, which
Mm-hmm.
is I haven't dealt with my stuff, with my religious wounding and my pain, and what it is that I gave up, as well as what I'm searching for. And so, one of the things that we do in spiritual direction is look at where is spirit leading you? Where do you need to heal your spirit from the ways human religion have caused harm? And what are the spiritual tools from a variety of traditions that do speak to me that I can use authentically and in creative ways that will help my spirit and my sense of connection with the divine and all of life grow?
Yeah. And I love that, Rivka. And I noticed that I know for myself personally, when the spiritual wounds were still in place, I could not use the word God. And and I had friends who used the word creator and who said that they felt that was appropriate for me to use as well when I asked them. And so I used the word creator or
Mhm.
source or goddess, but I could not speak to the patriarchal religion that I was raised in. And
Mhm.
yet, through the course of exploring all of these other traditions and the generosity of the people who've shared some of the key learnings and understandings with me and so on, I actually have moved back into a place of I was able to heal that wound, and
Right.
Reiki is the
Mhm.
key there. Reiki helped heal that religious wound, and I actually was able to move into an appreciation for
Yes.
that which I had to step away from.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
so appreciate the way that I was raised now. I appreciate the religion. I appreciate what it has done because it has had some very positive impacts
Right.
on the world, on society, on there are so many good people who use that as a structure to define themselves
Mhm.
um, and to live their lives from. And just, I was so happy to be able to return to an appreciation for all of that, even though I felt that I may have gone a little bit beyond it in my
Mhm.
understanding. Still, just such an appreciation for it once again, which was lovely because I did do the spiritual bypassing for a little while until Reiki brought the wound forward and said, let's just heal
Exactly.
this and see what happens.
Exactly. Yes, and that is the beauty of marrying Reiki with spiritual direction, is that opportunity to sit with and witness, oh, this part of me still hurts. And I'm hungry to connect with spirit, but I'm afraid to connect with spirit
Yeah.
because of the pain that's been done. And so having that opportunity to explore that, sit with that, allow Reiki to heal the wounds so that we can look more holistically at our life's experience, so that we can draw in the appreciations as well as recognize that, oh, that was part of my journey that was necessary for me to reach this.
Yeah.
And this is taking me to this. We are, as some have said, not bodies with spirits, but spirits in bodies. That the idea that this container is finite, but our connection with spirit is really how we connect with one another, how we connect with planet. I have a friend of mine who used to be atheist, who is now an interfaith chaplain from the same
Wow.
community I went to, and one of the things that he says is he just did not believe in the word God at all. And a friend of his opened his eyes when they said, just replace the word God with the word awe. When we're in awe of a wave, when we're in awe of a redwood tree, when we're in awe of the beauty and simplicity and complexity of a newborn baby. That's what all meaning making is about. It's like, how do I express awe and its preciousness to life and to me?
Wow. And you feel that with that awe, there is beauty all around us. And we can choose to look at what's not working, or we can choose to look at what is, and we can choose to look at the beauty. And I find that Reiki just keeps peeling back the layers so that I spend more and more of my day in awe. And
Yes.
in awe of the trees and the insects and the beautiful birds and the people, and which is so funny because I at one time I didn't even really care for people that much. I was more, and now I adore them. But it does move you more and more into that awe. I love that. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to leave people with before we move into our final prayer today?
I think the only other thing I would add is that whether we frame things in terms of spirit or not, we're all on a journey of making meaning of our lives. Mm-hmm. And particularly when we talk in terms of awe, whether somebody considers themselves religious or spiritual or, none of that speaks to me. I don't think that's anyone in this audience, because after all, Reiki is spiritual. In and of itself spirit. It is spiritual. But I think regardless of how one identifies their source, whether it is science or whether it is still being grounded in the tradition of their origin, all of these are tools, spiritual tools for making meaning of our lives. And when we can do that work, we're all raised up to a higher energetic level, which is what Reiki is all about.
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful way to wrap that up. Okay, that's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, I'm just going to invite you to move into our final meditation today. And so I'm going to invite you once more to close your eyes, just briefly bringing your hands into Gasho to activate your Reiki energy, and then placing your hands comfortably on your heart or any other part of your body where you feel guided, and just allowing the Reiki energy to move through you and to guide you and to just bring access to you to those different perspectives, access to the awe that we are all looking for, and for the meaning for you. And if you already are in a path where you feel comfortable, just opening your heart and mind to those who are walking on a slightly different trail or road, and just understanding that we are all moving into that place of meaning, of awe, of being connected with Source and with each other, connected with the earth, and just honoring those connections today. Is there anything you'd like to add, Rivka?
Source that is known by names such as Guanyin, Mary, Jesus. Source that is also known by names like compassion and hope and awe flow through us in the brilliance of Reiki light and the warmth of Reiki energy. To know that we are your hands and your eyes and your hearts that bring healing into this world. May it be so.
May it be so. Oh, and Rivka, thank you for joining us today, and I'd also like to thank all of the listeners. You are so special to us. We appreciate you giving us the gift of your time each week, and just so appreciate the opportunity to bring all of these wonderful and different perspectives around Reiki. So say thank you to you for all of the light that you spread in the world. And thank you, Rivka, for joining us.
My pleasure.
Namaste, everyone.